Birds of a Feather by Lara Puente, illustrated by Janice Skivington. Mrs. Helen Veslenko is my friend. She lives next door to Mommy, my mother, and me in a little house with a long yard in the front. I spent a lot of time in her house after school, talking with her and playing with Sammy, her parakeet. You wouldn't believe Mrs. Veslenko and I could be friends. I'm 11 years old and she's 75. I came to Chicago from Guatemala with my mom 6 years ago. Helen came 50 years ago from Ukraine, a country near Russia. Even though we are very different, we always have a lot to talk about. It wasn't always this way. The first time I met Mommy and I met The first time Mammy and I met Mrs. Valslenko, I didn't like her very much. I was afraid of her. Now that I know her, I know she was afraid of us too. We met her the day we moved into our new apartment. It was a hot August evening, and Mommy and I were in the alley unloading the last things from the trunk of the car. We were really tired. All we wanted to do was to go upstairs, take a cool shower, and find our beds. We had just picked up some bags when we heard an old woman's voice behind us. "Cannot park in the alley," she said, with a thick accent like the accent my Ukrainian friend Lydia's mom has. But Lydia's mom is always friendly. We could tell this voice was not. We looked up. There was an angry old woman standing in the yard next to our building, behind the fence. She was big and strong looking, with a broad back and thick arms and legs. She was wearing a long blue-gray house dress and flat, thick leather sandals. Her blue eyes glared at us from behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore her hair in thick braids across the top of her head. Mammy doesn't speak much English, so I spoke. "Oh, please, we're not going to park here," I said. "We just need to finish moving." Mammy was looking at Helen, smiling. I could tell that Mammy knew what was going on, but Helen was trying to frighten us. But Mammy pretended not to see this. "We finish soon. Nice to meet you," she said in her best English, smiling. "My name is Aurora. This is my daughter, Adriana. Adriana, say hello to the neighbor." Helen looked from Mammy to me. "Hello, nice to meet you," I said, even though it wasn't. "What is your name, please?" asked Mammy, still smiling. Helen looked surprised. Apparently nobody had spoken so many words to her in a long time. "Helen." "Oh, very nice. Very nice to meet you, Helen," said Mammy. "We finish soon. Don't worry." It took us a few more trips to finish our work. Helen watched us until we moved the car. Mammy is very friendly, so we quickly made friends in the new neighborhood. But actually, Mammy is more than just friendly. She's got a spark in her, a love of life. She cleans offices here even though she was a nurse back in Guatemala. After my father died, she tried to stay there, but she couldn't make enough for us to live. So we came to Chicago when I was just starting school. When we told people in the neighborhood where we lived, they always talked about Helen. It seemed as if everybody had some kind of incident with her. "She's strange," said Mrs. O'Reilly, who lived in the building on the other side of us. "She never says hello. When she does say something, it's usually to tell you what you're doing, that you're doing something wrong. Who needs it?" When I heard this, I felt a little better. At first, I had thought that Helen didn't like us, but now I knew she didn't like anybody. We did not see Helen frequently after the first meeting. We always said hello, and sometimes Helen answered. Sometimes I felt that she was curious about us, because Mammy is always so nice. One day in November, she came out to watch us put up a bird feeder on our porch. I thought she was going to tell us we couldn't do that, but she just kept looking at us to see what we were doing. She watched us pour the bird seed in and hang the feeder, and then she went back in her house. We bought the feeder because I was studying birds in school. Mr. Taylor, my teacher, had told us about a wonderful bird that lived in some areas of Chicago. He showed us pictures that reminded me of the colorful birds my grandmother had in Guatemala. The bird in the picture looked as if it belonged with those birds. It was a parrot with bright green feathers on its body and a fringe of deep blue feathers on its tail and wings. This is a monk parakeet, Mr. Taylor had said, and it is originally from South America. Then Mr. Taylor had told us how almost 40 years ago, monk parakeets were shipped to the United States to be sold as pets. At an airport in New York, a crate carrying them broke, and all the parakeets escaped. After that, the parakeets spread to many states, including Illinois. Mr. Taylor said the birds were spreading to more and more areas in Chicago. He said that people loved the birds because they were so pretty, but also because they were survivors. They were from a warm place, and yet they had figured out how to survive even in the worst Chicago winter. When the ground was covered with snow, the monk parakeets ate from bird feeders that people hung up. I liked thinking about how the monk parakeets ended up in Chicago, like Mammy and me. I hoped they would use our bird feeder, but mostly sparrows came. I was happy to feed them, but I wanted to see the monk parakeets. One day in February, on a very cold day, I heard Helen call out to me as I walked home from school. "You like birds, miss?" I looked over. Helen wasn't angry or glaring the way she usually was. There was a hint of a smile, very, very slight, as she spoke. She looked like a different person. "Oh, yes, I like them very much," I said. "You come to my house later," she said. "Tell your mother. I show you Sammy." And that's how everything changed with us. When Mammy came home from work, I told her about Helen. We went to see her after dinner. I couldn't believe we were actually walking up to Helen's door. I almost expected her to turn us away when she opened the door. But she didn't turn us away. At first, we were all a little shy, but we got comfortable when Helen brought Sammy, her parakeet, out of his cage. "Say hello, Sammy," said Helen, holding Sammy close to her face. "Hello, hello," said Sammy, cocking his head. "Sammy want a kiss?" asked Helen. "Sammy want a kiss," said Sammy, and brought his beak close to Helen's lips while she gave him a kiss. I loved watching Sammy with Helen. He talked just like her and walked all over her back and even on her braids. He was just an ordinary parakeet, but he was as wonderful to me as the monk parakeets I had been wanting to see. After playing with Sammy, Helen asked if we wanted a snack. She brought out juice and Ukrainian sweets, and we talked for a long time. I told her about school, and Mammy talked about her job. "I cleaned offices too," said Helen, "many years ago." She told us she had retired 10 years ago and that her husband and son, her only family here, had been killed in a car accident many years before that. "That was very hard," she said, shaking her head. Mammy and I looked at each other. After Poppy died, we had each other, but Helen had been left alone. I began to understand why she might be angry and afraid. After that, we became good neighbors. We started to visit Helen more, and she came to our place. When people in the neighborhood saw this, they started to talk to her, and now she is friends with them too. Sometimes in the summer, Helen comes for a cool glass of lemonade. We sit in the kitchen with the window open and watch the birds come to the feeder. I've told Helen about the monk parakeets. None of them have come yet, but I keep hoping. And that is the end of our story.